Lazar.
Hi, how are
Okay.
you?
Okay,
Good,
let's
good.
today we will talk about renting. We will discuss about renting a place in Australia, mostly in Sydney. Let me ask you my first question. Please tell the advantages and disadvantages living in the dormitory, university dormitory, and in a flat for the students.
Okay, so the biggest disadvantage, we'll start with the disadvantages, is that dormitories are usually quite expensive. So depending on the university or depending on where you decide to rent, you can be paying 2 or 3 times more than you would pay for renting a room with someone else. So it could be quite expensive. However, if a person has the money and wishes to have the convenience, renting in a dormitory would be easy in terms of everything will be set up for them. So electricity will be running, water, they won't have to do any of those things, and they'll be very close to the university as well. So, and they'll be able to get some support from the administration of the university or the dormitory. But overall, dormitories are usually quite expensive, and not many people choose to live in a dormitory. At the same time, living in a dormitory will allow you to meet a lot of people from your university. It will help you network. But again, it depends on a person's preferences. If they're willing to pay 2 or 3 times more than they would if they rent on their own, dormitory could be the way to go.
Clear. Let's move to another question. If a student lives in a flat, what kind of requirements to find a flat? Where we can find a flat?
Okay, so we have to separate this question into two. If a person would like to rent a flat on their own, they would then need to purchase furniture, connect to electricity, connect to internet, and all that. So if a person wants to find an apartment on their own, probably one of the best sites would be domain.com.au, right? And I've given you an example here. I've done a little search in Domain for this suburb. This is a suburb in Sydney, and it gives you an overview of how much a person would pay per week if they live in that area. So this type of flat would be about 450 Australian dollars per week. Okay? And you can have a look at the pictures, you can have a look at the condition. Now, this is a brand new unit that's 640, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep on scrolling down, you have different price ranges depending on what you're after. So that designates 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom and toilet, and a car, probably either car space or garage. That's another one. If a person wishes to live in a shared accommodation, they can use a site like country.com.au, and in here you can find rooms for rent, and you'll be living with other people, right? So you can either have a room on your own, or sometimes you can have more than one person per room. It really depends on how much money you're willing to spend. And usually rooms already come with electricity included in the fee, and other expenses, so internet or whatnot. That depends on the actual individual person, but usually electricity and utilities are included. So you can have a look, you can find rooms from 175, 200, 250 per room. And usually they come with a bed, some furniture, right?
Yeah, here.
So the price range could be, if you decide to rent a room or to rent a space in a house or a unit, you could be paying from 150, 175, 200, 250 per week. And if you decide to rent on your own, it really depends on how new and how big you want the place to be. But you can go, up to $900. That's a house for 500. 470 for a unit. We had a unit at 450 per week. And usually the rent is paid either per week or every 2 weeks. And it's paid in advance. So you would pay for 2 weeks in advance. If you would like to rent a unit or a house on your own, you also need to put a bond. And usually the bond is for 4 weeks in advance. So you'll be paying 4 weeks of rent in advance plus 2 weeks of rent in advance.
Total 6.
And then once you leave the place, if everything is in good condition, they will give the bond back to you. So you get this money back.
Oh, interesting. One more question. What kind of documents are required in order to rent a house or
So
a flat?
usually you need to show that you have enough money to pay the rent in your bank account, or you need to show that you are working and have an income from which you can pay the rent. Now, sometimes they request that you provide references to show that you've lived in other places and you're a good tenant. But if you get to Australia and you've never rented in Australia, that might be a little bit difficult. Now, there could be additional documents they request from you, but that's up to the agency. But the most common documents are evidence that you have sufficient money, that you're working, and that you have a good rental history. If a person wants to, probably the best thing to do initially, if you're coming from overseas, is to have a look at this site so you can rent something before you get to Australia, and you can live there for a month or 2 or 6 or whatnot until you sort of find a job, and then you can sort of move out on your own. And you can also use Airbnb, right? And that gives you, sorry, this is in yen, but this gives you an average idea of how much rent would be for 1 or 2 days. But Airbnb is usually more expensive than this thing here, Gumtree. Okay.
What about hostels? Airbnb, it's like a hostel, right?
No, Airbnb is a website where people rent out rooms or houses or units privately, and you can book through this website. Hostels also exist, but you have backpacker hostels where you can have 5-10 people in one room, living on bunk beds. Sleeping on bunk beds. But they'll need to search individually. It really depends on what area this is in. Most people who are coming to Australia to study would share a unit. They wouldn't really go into hostels. Hostels are more for backpackers, people that come to travel and work and travel and work.
Yeah, clear. How many people can live in one room? Usually, is there any requirements, limitations?
I cannot really answer that question because the regulations for different areas could be different, and I'm not too familiar with that. Now, how many people actually live in a room might be different from how many people are meant to be living in a room, but I cannot comment on that.
Okay, that's enough. Thank you for your talking. I hope that it will be interesting and useful for our students. Have a nice time.
Thank you. Bye.